Many of you know this. I was up over in Tennessee here in July for a couple of weeks and took a C.S. Lewis class. I always say I'm not that smart. That really made me not feel very smart. That C.S. Lewis class is deep. The people in my class, we have about 16 to 17 individuals who are going through the doctorate program at Emmanuel, and to be honest, those individuals they think in a different level than I do, and I was just blew my mind to listen, to hear the depth and the understanding. For me, have you guys ever, when you remember English class in high school and you read Shakespeare? Any of you resonate with that? Oh yeah, Shakespeare, I totally get everything. Anyone? Oh yeah, y'all are. You're the people I was sitting in class with going, I don't know what, the English teacher would be like, all right, what is Shakespeare saying here? I'm like, I don't know. He loves something. I know. That's how I felt in the C.S. Lewis class. I just felt totally in a different space. Well, then the next week was preaching, and pretty much the same students that were in the C.S. Lewis class stayed and did the preaching class. So now I'm sitting here and I'm in a place where I know that everybody's smarter than me, and we have to deliver two messages in front of our peers. And I have to tell you what, there was this time where I was paralyzed. During that week, I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I tried to smarten up my message, go get smart quotes and do things that make me look like I know what I'm talking about. So there's that part. I wanted to sound like I was smart. But then there was a side of me that's like, if I knock this out of the park, maybe this school will want me to come back and be a keynote speaker. It flipped on me. I'm like, so I went from being paralyzed to now being prideful. I was going through this thing going, I got this thing nailed. This is going to be great. And what if I really do a good job and the president hears about it? Because he just came to lunch today with us, and he might go, oh, you're Bob Johnson. Oh, we need to have you come out, and you just change the lives of all of our doctorate and ministry students, and this is great. And so now I'm going there, right? And I'm thinking, goodness, what in the world am I doing? Well, when I became a Christian, so my math was fuzzy. My mom and dad watch the messages every week, and then my mom, God bless her, she corrects me. And so I got the correcting text, yes, Mom, this last week from her. I've only been a Christian for 44 years. So my math was fuzzy. Last week I said it was 46 years, and I got the text very quick. Nope, you were baptized on October 18th, 1981. I'm like, okay, sorry about that. So there you go. I've corrected it. But over the 44 years, and especially when I first became a Christian, I remember I swung on the same extremes that I did when I was in class those last 2 weeks. Most of the time I was intimidated by God. I was intimidated by the people around me. And then there were moments that I tried to impress God. I'm pretty good. I remember the very first time I delivered a message at the church. It was Lake Grove Christian Church, and I was 16 years old, and the pastor invited me to deliver the message, and because it was Youth Sunday, right? So you had the youth up there, and they do everything. And so I delivered the message, and I remember I got to this communion time, and I was feeling pretty good. And so I remember that I took communion, and then I think I took a piece of gum out of my pocket and started to chew it. And I'm like, after I talk about how communion makes my mouth taste funny and all of that, and then talked about it being a little snack, and then I took the wrapper of the gum and I threw it to my parents. Here you go. I was just feeling super cocky. And at that moment, I'm like, I still sweat. I'm sweating right now, telling that story. How horrible was that I went from this extreme of, I'm totally paralyzed to now I'm super cocky about this. I don't know about you, but are you paralyzed at times of your life? Especially when there's the do's and don'ts? The do's and don'ts of life, right? And if I'm doing things right, then I can kind of step with a little bit of a pride in my step. But man, when things aren't going so well and the don'ts take place and I kind of fail in the don'ts, right? You get to a place where you're a bit paralyzed because you have failed in those areas. The thing that Paul does in Romans chapter 7 is he addresses this kind of swing that Jesus followers go through that the law creates. And the law created these swings of, hey, I am paralyzed. There's no way that I can do all of these things. And then the law at times could do this. Look at me. I was a pretty good Christian this week. I did this. I read my Bible. I prayed 7 times. I came to church. I even wrote a check. This is great. I am doing good, right? We go through those swings. And Paul's like, here's where we're going. This thing with God is not about do's and don'ts, performance driven. It's about relationship. And so he uses chapter 7 to really help the Jesus follower understand what does it look like to have a true relationship with the creator of the universe. So if you would you stand with me as we look at this? We're going to look at Romans chapter 7, verses 1 through 6. There are 3 parts to this. There's a proposition. There's an illustration. So there's a proposition. Paul's like, here's the issue. There's an illustration. He's going to kind of use a cultural situation to be able to help us understand what he's talking about. And then he's going to give application. So in your notes in front of you, you'll see I have that listed, that just how Paul does it in Romans chapter 7 in these first 6 verses. So here you go. Do you not know, brothers and sisters, for I'm speaking to those who know the law, that the law has authority over someone only as long as that person lives? For example, by law, a married woman is bound to her husband as long as he is alive. But if her husband dies, she is released from the law that binds her to him. So then, if she has sexual relations with another man while her husband is still alive, she is called an adulteress. But if her husband dies, she is released from that law and is not an adulteress if she marries another man. So, my brothers and sisters, you died to the law through the body of Jesus Christ, that you might belong to another, to him who was raised from the dead, in order that we might bear fruit for God. For when we were in the realm of the flesh, the sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in us, so that we bore fruit for death. But now by dying to what once bound us, we have been released from the law so that we serve in the new way of the Spirit and not in the old way of the written code. You may be seated. And it's just a great word. So here you go. The main point. We're 34 minutes into the service. You can walk out in like a minute and a half. The main point is this. This passage notes that we cannot live by the rules or even try to live by the rules. We must learn to live by relationship. You can put it this way. True release, when you're released from the do's and don'ts, when you're released from the burden of the performance type of lifestyle, then true release comes from a relationship with Jesus, not from rules. So here's Paul's proposition, and it's in verse 1. It's pretty easy to see. It's kind of amazing. In this chapter, you're going to find the word law written or spoken about 28 times. Whew, that's a lot. But if you look at verse 1, he says the law, he talks about the law, and it refers to the Old Testament law, right? It refers to the 10 Commandments. But you will also note that there were a total of, anyone know? How many laws were there for the Jews to follow? 613. 613 of those things that you needed to follow. How well are you doing with that today? 613. Talk about something that can be paralyzing. Trying to live life, navigating it through what you can and can't do. And Paul is assuming there's this general knowledge among the readers about the nature of law. That's what he means when he writes, do you not know, right? He says that the law has absolute authority and jurisdiction over us. The problem is that none of us can live out the law completely. Here's the thing. None of us can perform well enough to show God that we deserve anything. And I'll be honest with you, whether we're trying to follow the 613, laws, or we just live in a world where we go from being paralyzed to being prideful, we cannot live well in that way. You know what that's like, right? Because when you're paralyzed, you can't move. And when you're prideful, then it's all about me. And in all of this, Paul is trying to point to a very different way. Here's one pastor, he suggested the characteristics of living by the law or living by do's and don'ts looks like this. You could summarize it like this. We struggle with pride, right? Even though we know we can't meet all of the standards, it's very easy to boast about our own accomplishments. A focus on performance always leads to pride. So if you're focused on performance, it's going to lead to pride. I'll have to say, like even in our business, when we have good weeks, and we've been super blessed over the last few months. When we started the year, it was super slow for our company, our family business. And, you get to a point where, right, we're not performing, so now I'm paralyzed. I'm terrified. How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And Stephanie, she's always like, don't worry, Bob, God's going to provide. I'm like, but he's not providing right now, right? And I start to stomp my feet. And she's like, no, we're going to be fine. We're going to trust God, and we're going to pray this through, and we're going to be okay. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Why can't I just be mad? She's like, it doesn't help. Well, the last couple of months, it's been great. We've had a couple of great months. And that's been nice. And so now I look out and I go, look how good we are. Do you see all the 5-star ratings that Drew keeps giving us over every week? It's so nice. We go through that and I'm like, look at the 5-star ratings. We are good this week. That's why things are going well. Yeah? I've learned over time, especially with our company, that I walk out of there, no matter if it's good or bad, to just give thanks. God, this isn't performance driven. I know and trust in you. So it's not about me, it's about what God's doing. But, right, the other issue with a kind of a do's and don'ts performance based lifestyle is, one, we have a pride thing going on, and then two, you can have a critical spirit. I'm sure none of you are like this. But another way to recognize people who live under the law is that they become very critical of others. Have you ever noticed that there's just something about the law that makes you judge? We can be blind to error in our own lives, and yet we often have our eyes wide open to the faults of others. Like, wow, look at that person. They are bad. Or, man, they are obviously not living the way they're supposed to. That's not good. We have this critical spirit. It just becomes part of who we are. And then, as this pastor talked about, he suggested the last characteristic of living under the law or living under the do's and don'ts lifestyle is hypocrisy. Because there's an inherent tension in trying to live by the law, and we know we're not meeting the subscribed standards. There's a temptation to appear like I am, which leads to hypocrisy. Well, I'm going to put on a false mask. I'm going to show people that I'm living a good life when I'm really not. So how do you get out of under this? How do you get out of the do's and don'ts? Well, Paul talks about the only way to break bondage, the only way to break out of that kind of lifestyle is you got to die to it. You got to stop it. You got to finish it off. The law has authority over man only as long as he lives. So here's where, don't go too deep into the illustration, but Paul is trying to make a point out of this. The question becomes, have you died to the law? Have you died to the do's and don'ts? Have you moved away from the performance part of your life? The law can be one's Lord, but that ends in death, and it dissolves the dominion. As we've already established from chapter 6, believers have died with Christ, so you have a new relationship. And I think this sums it up well. So if you want to sum this point 1 up well, here it is. Though freed from the law with its stern demands, no longer ruled by its harsh commands, I'm bound to Jesus Christ, love and am truly free to live and act the way that Christ designed me. That's the thing. When you live in a performance-based world and you try to live that type of a lifestyle, especially when it comes to your relationship with God, if you try to do the do's and don'ts, then you lose the way that Christ designed you. God designed you with relationship in mind. And so what does that look like? Go to point number 2, because here's Paul's illustration. When you go into verses 2 and 3, he uses this imagery. In chapter 6, Paul uses simile of slavery, and now he uses the metaphor of marriage. Some would say they are very similar. It's like the old saying, love is blind and marriage is an eye-opener. It can be, right? Yesterday, we were at a wedding, beautiful wedding outside, and it was fun to be at the wedding. There were so many, it was friends. Our children grew up with the people who are getting married. So now our son, Cade, his friends are all getting married, and he's in a posse of about 7 or 8 dudes who do life together. And I love, they played football together. They do everything together. Now each of the boys is starting to get married. So we went to the wedding yesterday, and it was like a can-be reunion, right? All the families, all the kids. It was just fun to see everybody. Here's what I did notice. I digress. I understand completely that I'm in the boat, but I walked into there, and I looked at all the moms and dads, and I've coached all of these kids. So I've seen the kids over time. They've grown up, but I haven't seen the parents. They're all walking like this, holding the hands of their wives. And in my mind, I'm like, I remember when they were young and vibrant and yelling at the referees. Now they're old, and I'm like, oh man, that must mean I'm old. So I went through this whole thing yesterday. I've seen all these old parents celebrating this wedding. But what I loved about the wedding is they fell in love with one another through really some crazy circumstances. But at the end of the day, they fell in love and desired a relationship with one another that they want to have for eternity. And the thing that you know about married couples is this. You didn't fall in love because somebody told you to fall in love with them. There wasn't a bunch of do's and don'ts that says, well, you do this and this and this, and then you're going to be able to get married to that person. You fell in love with the person. The relationship is what was built over time. And so Paul uses marriage as really an illustration of what this all looks like. Let me just say that in the next few verses that you see, verses 2 and 3 and such, where he talks about marriage, it's not a definitive passage on the biblical view of divorce and remarriage. Please know, you got to take the context of Scripture all into play in this. But in other words, this passage is not so much Paul teaching about marriage, but it is instead an illustration that we've been released from rules and have entered into a new relationship with Jesus. And that's what Paul's trying to show in this thing. So here's Paul's main point. When we're trying to live by the law, we're bound by the law, right? We live by these do's and don'ts. But there's a new relationship. And it's only possible when you're released from the old one. You can't do both. You can't live in a performance-based world and try to please God and do all of these things, and that's going to prove that I'm in a right relationship, and then also try to own the fact that, it's about a relationship. And I love all the songs we sang today. If you'll know when we sing them, it's not like, dear God, do you see how great I am today? It's amazing. I deserve to be in your presence. None of that. You don't hear any of those songs, right? It is like, God, I trust in you. I believe in you. I'm broken and I'm following you. You are, it's all about relationship. Verses 2 through 3 speak into this really clearly, but let me give you something out of Colossians chapter 7. Because Paul uses this image of marriage. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 says this, a woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must belong to the Lord. Marriage is a contract. It is a covenant that is dissolved by death. That's why you'll find in most wedding vows, right? That till death do us part, as long as we both shall live. We know that. But true release from a relationship, it comes when death takes place. And that's the point that Paul's trying to make. Paul's trying to make that a true relationship, if you're going to move into a right relationship with Jesus, you have got to die to the way you used to live. You got to die to that. It's got to start a whole new thing. So let me give you the application, because the application is kind of what he wants us to walk away with. And this is where you're going to have some blanks to fill in this scripture time. So you got Paul's proposition, you got the illustration that he uses, you've got to die to how you used to live, and now you're in a relationship with Jesus, and here's the application. 4 things. The first one is this: die to the do's and don'ts lifestyle. Die to the do's and don'ts lifestyle. Galatians chapter 2, verse 19, for through the law I died to the law so that I might live for God. If you're doing the do's and don'ts, who are you living for? Me. Look how good I'm doing. I'm working my way through this thing. And Paul says, man, that's not what this is all about. I can never live for the Lord until we first declare our death to the demands of the law. Galatians chapter 3 says this. And actually Psalm 19:7 both kind of talk about this relationship. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. What he's trying to say is the law is not inherently bad, but the role of the law was to point you in the direction to have a relationship with the Creator. Romans 5:20, the law was added so that the trespass might increase. Right? We've talked about this. Paul says the law was here so that you would know that you are broken, and then thrusts you into, I can't do this. I need Jesus. A couple things about this, and we'll even talk about it next week because we're going to go into verse 12. But the law is more of a condemning thing, and that's what the do's and don'ts do. It doesn't commend, it condemns. It cannot save, it cannot sanctify you. We're going to learn next week from verse 12 that the law is holy, it's righteous, and it's good, but it can never remove sin. It just exposes sin. That's all the law does. The law always points out what we've done wrong, but never compliments us when we do the right thing. When I was in college, I played basketball my first 2 years at Pacific Christian College, which is now Hope University. And I enjoyed it. I love playing basketball. I had a scholarship to go play at Oregon State, and it didn't do that. I wanted to go into ministry, so I went to a Christian college down in California. And I played basketball my first 2 years. And a couple things, my coach, I got to play. It was a ton of fun. We were a very good basketball team, not because of me, although some days it was because of me. I'm just kidding. It was not. I came off the bench and played. It was fun, but coach was like, hey, I want you, one, to be a spiritual mentor to some of these guys that are coming into the college to play because they didn't have really a strong relationship with Jesus. And 2, I want you to drive the van. So I was like, hey, that's cool. I'm good with that. I'll drive, you know. Well, we drove 2 vans. So I drove one and coach drove the other. Little did I know my coach had a lead foot. So to stay up with my coach in California or New Mexico or Arizona or Colorado, I had to go with him, like fly. Just so you know, during my first 2 years of college, I got a speeding ticket in California, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Oregon. There's another state in there I got a ticket from and I remember the first time I got pulled over, Coach and I get pulled over, and I'm sobbing, like, I'm gonna get a ticket. And I got a ticket, and I remember we got to our destination afterwards, and I'm crying, and I call my dad, and I'm like, Dad, I just got a speeding ticket, and I don't know what to do. And my dad's like, you know, we'll figure it out and all of that. And then my coach comes to me and he says, I will take care of your ticket. I will take care of all of your speeding tickets. That is, he'll pay for them. Well, the nice thing about that time of life is if you got them in a state, they didn't cross over. So like Oregon never knew that I got all these tickets, speeding tickets. So that was really good, right? So I'm like, man, I got all these speeding tickets, but I never had to pay for them. I was always looking forward to the moment, though, that I would get pulled over and the cop would go, you know what, son? It's okay. I totally understand that you're following your coach. Go on your way, have grace, right? And move forward and be safe. That never happened. Do you know why? Why? Yeah, because I broke the law. You know, I broke the law, and who I was following was breaking the law. And so because I was breaking the law, I deserved, right, the penalty that came with that. The law, the speeding, you get pulled over, you know, when you break a law, it's designed to condemn you, not commend you. Never once was I pulled over by an officer and go, we just want to say thank you for driving the speed limit today. Have you ever been pulled over that way? The law doesn't do that. The law isn't designed to tell you you're doing a great job. It's designed when you break it to tell you you broke it, right? And so in all of that, we have to remember that we got to die to that thing. We've got to say, we got to die to the do's and don'ts lifestyle because there's nothing about it that commends. There's nothing about it. All it does is condemn. And that was the role. It was to show you that you aren't worthy, that God has got to come in and take care of the sin problem. And so, how do you do that? Well, here's your second plank. You need to say, I do. I do to Jesus. Now, yep, there's that I do, the first I do. I'm all in. You know what? I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I'm baptized, right? And then I do, and I grow, and I mature. There is an essence of this, though. Every morning, every day you wake up, it needs to be, I do. Yes, I'm committed to you. Every morning, you know, Stephanie and I wake up in the morning, and I'm just so grateful for my relationship with my wife. Every day, it's an I do. Like, I do. I love you. I want to be with you. I want to take care. I want to be in a right relationship with you. And so that is so key in our own relationship with Jesus. Here's the thing about that. In the sense that we're married to Jesus, it's beautiful because when you're married to someone, you have what? A personal relationship with them. We used to be married to rules. We used to be married to do's and don'ts, to that which condemned us. But now we're released and we're married to the Master, Jesus. And it would do us well to ponder our betrothal of the bride of Christ. The Bible declares that as believers, we are the bride and Jesus is the bridegroom. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2 reminds us that we've got to be faithful and pure. It says this, I am jealous, God says, for you with a godly jealousy. I promised you to one husband, Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him. John looks ahead at the wedding feast in Revelation chapter 19, verse 7, and says, let us rejoice and be glad and give him the glory, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. And then finally in Revelation 21:9, come and I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. Here's the key. You're in a married relationship with Jesus. You've said, I do. Live that way. Don't live in a performance-based, man, I should do this, I should do that. And if I don't, then I'm going to fail. No, I do what I do because I've fallen in love with who I'm married with or to. After his wife died, Billy Graham made a statement that revealed how close he was to Ruth. We've rekindled the romance of our youth, and my love for her continues to grow deeper and deeper every day. I don't know if you remember the story of Jacob and Rachel, but Laban, representing the law, told Jacob that if he wanted to be married to Rachel, he would have to work 7 years for her. Genesis 29:20 reveals a heart of true love. So Jacob, guess what he did? Served 7 years for Rachel. But they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Have you ever said, I do to the love of Jesus? Have you ever got to a point where you're like, you know what? I just want to live well for him. I'll give you the couple last things here. When you do that, you bear fruit. It's your third thing there. I have used this illustration before. If you have a lemon tree in your backyard, what fruit do you expect it to produce? Right? Okay, this is super elementary, right? If you have an apple tree, you expect it to produce apples. If you've got a money tree, you expect it to produce money, right? Whenever one of you find one of those money tree things, it'd be amazing, yes? But there's an expectation that there's fruit that's born in a relationship with Jesus. The last part of verse 4 declares our purpose as believers. In order that we might, Paul says, in order that you might bear fruit for God. Literally means we do bring forth fruits to God. The product of true fruit of faith is always fruit. You've died to the law and now belong to the Lamb so that you might become fruit bearers. John 15:8, this is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. It's a really good reminder. If we say we have faith, if we say we're married to Jesus, then there's got to be fruit that's born out of that. So where do you go to figure that out? What does the fruit look like? You go to Galatians, right? One pastor refers to Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 23 in this way. It's the 9 children that are a result of being a Jesus follower. You're married to Jesus. These are the 9 children that come about as a result of that marriage. They are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and the one that we're all super good at, self-control. Our fruit should be evident in our character, in our conduct, and in the people that we're pouring into to follow Jesus. It should be seen in our attitude, in our actions, and in our offspring. And then finally, here's my last plea, and Paul's last plea to you. Don't go back. Don't go back. Don't go back to the performance lifestyle. The law is good as an expression of God's desires. And we need to remember that what got us before we were believers, and it is that which brings death. But now in verse 5, Paul says, for when we were controlled by the sinful nature, the sinful passions aroused by the law were at work in our bodies, right? The law exposed it. Here it is. Here's what you've got. So now, as you die to that, you are in a relationship with Jesus, and the fruit that is born, that comes out of that is good, and it's sweet, it is beautiful, and it is perfect. Paul asks a penetrating, and I'll close with this. Paul asks this penetrating question, right, in Galatians 3. Are you so foolish? After beginning with the Spirit, are you now trying to attain your goal by human effort? Family, that's the question. Now that you know, when Paul speaks into this, it's about I do with Jesus. Are you living that kind of lifestyle? Are you one that it's freeing and it bears fruit and it's sweet and it's beautiful? And when you're in alignment with him, it is so, so great. Because what I don't like is when I walked into class, in the preaching class, after the first week in the C.S. Lewis class, and I was paralyzed knowing that I had 2 sermons that I needed to preach. And I wanted everybody to think that I was going to be good. And then at the end, right, I was like, well, maybe they'll think I'm great. I hate that lifestyle. It is a roller coaster ride of emotions. And it paralyzes you to the point of anxiety and worry. And then it takes you to an essence of the highs of the high where you think you're better than everybody else. God says, you know what? all I desire is to do life with you. And that's one of the things that I've noticed in my marriage with Stephanie. She doesn't care how great I am at anything. She just cares to do life with me. And I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to sit down with your spouse and have that conversation, but I'm pretty much going to guarantee you that your spouse doesn't love you because you're good at anything. They love you because it's you. And they desire to have a relationship with you. Yesterday at the wedding ceremony, the young couple had gone on a hike before they got engaged. And they took a picture next to a cliff, to a bluff, a selfie. And the girlfriend, who's now the bride, she walked away to head back to the car, and she turned around and realized Aaron wasn't there. Well, what happened was after they took the selfie, she walked away and Aaron fell down the cliff. He's about 10 to 15 feet below, laughing. She gets to him and she's terrified. But he's laughing and he's laughing, he's laughing. And she reaches down and they're trying to get up and he's trying to get up and they're both laughing and all of this kind of stuff. And then she realized this. I don't want to do life with anybody else but him. I was that afraid to lose him that I just realized I want to do life with him. What I love about that illustration is, right, Aaron fell off of a bluff. Very embarrassing. And it could have ruined the whole relationship. Like, I don't want to be married to a guy that's a klutz. I'm sure that's what's going on through his mind. And at the end of the day, that's not what was in her mind. And I love that about our relationship with God. He doesn't look at us and go, I don't want any relationship with you because you're a mess up. He looks at you and says, I don't want to do life with anybody else but you. And I pray that just motivates you. And that motivation then you find bears fruit. That brings an incredible life, not only to you, but to those around you and those you get to pour into.